Good morning, sir.
Hi. So we looked at two-thread synchronization, which was Peterson's lock. Then we looked at n-thread synchronization, which was Bakery's algorithm. And then we had some doubts about whether the order of statements matters in Peterson's lock, that is the two-threaded version. And we had some discussion and so on. As I had said in the last discussion, that there are 4 such combinations of these, and we would like to see if there is an issue in any of these. So whether mutual exclusion is guaranteed in all the cases or not. And so let's see. So there are these 4 combinations, right? The first one is essentially Peterson's lock. The second one reorders the first 2 statements, which are highlighted in orange, highlighted in yellow. And then the third one reorders both the initial 2 as well as the conditions within the while loop. And the fourth one reorders only the conditions but does not reorder the initial assignment statements, right? So these are the 4 combinations. And we would like to see if Peterson's lock works in all these cases or not. So this one we know is Peterson's lock and it ensures mutual exclusion. So that is not an issue. Let's focus on the other one. Right? So let's see. So this particular version means that I'm setting victim to myself first. Each thread is setting it to itself, and then flag, that is, I'm interested in entering the critical section, this is mentioned later. So as far as the conditions are concerned, both these effects have been done by the time a thread evaluates this condition. So one might feel that the effect is not really causing any issue, but it does. And I'm going to show you an execution timeline of these 2 threads, which is going to result in an issue. Right? So let's assume that top to bottom is the timeline. And then there are 2 threads, thread 0 and thread 1, and how different threads are executing these statements. So we can assume that individual statements are atomic in nature, that is assignment to victim, assignment to flag of me. These are atomic, but it's possible that there might be interleaving between these statements. Similarly, the condition flag of other and victim equals we need not be atomic, which means that I might check flag of other, and then there might be some assignment to victim or assignment to flag or more, and then I check victim equals me. So that is also possible. So the evaluation, the execution order can be something like this. Let's analyze what happens in this case. So thread 1 sets victim equal to 1, right, initially. Then thread 0 kicks in and it executes all these statements, right? And since thread 1 has not set flag to true yet, that is happening later. Therefore, when it checks flag of the other thread, it finds that it is false, and therefore it does not check for victim, and therefore it enters the critical section. Once that has happened, the thread 1 sets the flag to true. Then it checks if flag equals a flag of the other thread, which is thread 0, is 1 or not. It is true because thread 0 is executing the critical section. So it has set its flag to 1, mentioning that it is interested in entering the critical section. And after that, it checks whether victim is equal to 1. That is, victim equals me. Now, this victim value was set by thread 1 first and then overwritten by thread 0. And therefore, victim's value is 0. Therefore, the second condition is false. And therefore, the overall while condition is false. And therefore, thread 1 can also enter the critical section. Right? So this is one execution where Peterson's lock, I mean, it's not really Peterson's lock, the algorithm, the variant of Peterson's lock that we have come up with, that will not work for mutual exclusion. And yeah, so this is one execution. So any concerns, or is there anything wrong with what I said, or is there anything more that anybody wants to add? Okay, so this execution order does not ensure mutual exclusion, so therefore this code is buggy. I would like you to spend some time thinking about what happens in the third case. Right, so please think about this, and so I'll spend some seconds on this one after you are done. Shade is suggesting that it's buggy. Any other suggestions? Okay. Venkat also suggests that this will have issue. Same problem, Sai Chaitanya. Okay, looks good. So no mutual exclusion is what. Okay, I think Rigved should not be answering this, because Rigved is the one who actually found out that reordering these statements will create the problem. He realized it 2 classes ago. Venkat realized it last class. I realized it much later. So thanks for this discussion. I think this has definitely improved our understanding of the algorithm. Okay, so as you guys have rightly noted, the same execution order that is shown for thread 0 and thread 1 will create problem for the third one. And the commonality across the two versions is that the statement ordering of this victim and flag of me, the assignments to these, that is causing the issue. And if you work it out for the last one, let's see what happens. So please spend a few seconds thinking about this. Okay, Aditya and Venkat feel that this will work. Sai Chaitanya also feels that this will work. Okay. All right. So, yeah, I also could not find out if there is any problem with this particular code, right? So unless I prove it, that won't be valid. But yeah, that's what our hand waving argument is, that this code seems to behave in a similar manner as the first code, and therefore this does not have this problem. But yeah, I think you should check this offline in case you find out some bug. Please let us know. So interestingly, what this indicates is that the conditions are not really a problem. It's the statement order which is causing the issue, and therefore we need to be careful about this part. Okay, so this was a good discussion. As they say that the students learn the most when the instructor is confused, and I think that's what happened in this case. I'm sure there will be more such occasions. All right, so this was about the two-threaded case. Then we looked at Bakery's algorithm. Sorry, yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, sir, if the two assignment statements are split up, or rather, if the while is executed afterwards, say in this one, say thread 1 executes flag of me equal to true and victim equal to me, right, and thread 0 executes its full statements and enters critical section, and then thread 1 checks for the while condition.
No. If a thread 1 has executed the two statements, that means it has set flag of itself to true.
Yes, sir.
Right? Then when thread 0 comes in and starts executing all of these, then it has set its own victim to itself. So victim equals me is true, as well as flag of other is true.
Yes, sir. Got it.
It's all right. I mean, you should definitely think about various situations, not an issue. Right? So therefore, the mutual exclusion seems to be guaranteed. At least the execution sequence that we discussed does not cause an issue. But yeah, please think also again later. Okay, so then we looked at the n-threaded case, which was our Bakery's algorithm. And there were some small variations in this, in the sense that max may be atomic, may not be atomic, and it will still work depending upon how you implement the less than condition. Right. So it also assumes that it's all volatile, and therefore there is no effect of caching here. Right. So in the context of GPUs, we said that across warps is similar to CPU, and it works out fine. Within the warps, there is SIMD execution, and therefore some behaviors get masked out within the warp. And the threads can get the same label if max is not atomic. Right? But because of the thread ID, the less than needs to be kicked in. So, however, while all of this will work on the GPU, in general, the locks are very, very costly on the GPUs, and therefore they are usually prohibited unless there is some, I mean, because of the way the application works. I mean, it's not that you cannot implement locks on GPU. You can implement locks on GPU. Very similar to what you do on the CPU. A little change might be required, as we'll discuss. But more importantly, because of the large amount of synchronization that is required across threads. I mean, lock is a mutual exclusion, right? I mean, typically when we talk about locks, it's a mutex lock, mutual exclusion lock. And therefore, the cost involved in waiting turns out to be much, much larger, especially in the context of large number of threads. If you have to wait for 10 of your friends to go for a movie, versus if you have to wait for 10,000 of your friends to go for a movie, you can imagine the amount of waiting that might happen across all threads, right? So that's what happens on the GPU. And therefore, it is recommended that you should possibly rethink of the coordination required across threads. Need not have locks per se. You can, if you can design your algorithm such that you get rid of locks and design it in a slightly different way, that can turn out to be better. right? So if you don't get a lock, don't block, right? So that's what is the usual kind of philosophical statement. If you can't get a lock now, don't wait. Just go ahead, try again later. Right? Don't keep spinning and waste the GPU cycles. So that's what is the issue on the GPU. There is also a cost involved in terms of power consumption because of spinning, and because of lack of sophisticated data structures on the GPU. Not always the sleep and wake up calls are actually implemented. So there is currently, those libraries are still in infancy. It's not supported by CUDA as such. Those need to be implemented explicitly by a programmer, that to reduce the waiting time, the thread can go to sleep and some other thread can wake up that particular thread or warp. This is not directly provided in the libraries. So the cost involved is much higher, and well, rightly so, because GPUs are traditionally meant for data parallel operations where things are mostly independent. Synchronization is not the primary concern of, let's say, traditional GPU algorithms. But more and more algorithms are getting, let's say, ported or implemented on GPUs, and that those algorithms many times require some synchronization. And there are algorithms which are synchronization heavy or memory access heavy. Those are also called as memory bound algorithms. So those do require you some sort of synchronization or coordination across there. So there we need to definitely worry about this. And as we will study other forms of synchronization, some of this slide will become easier for you to understand, right? But the takeaway is that the locks are feasible on the GPU. And if the spinning cost is not too high, if it so happens that the threads are almost always not going to race for the same lock, then it is okay. They can race for different locks. That is all right. That's not an issue. If that means that different groups of people are meeting at different points and going to different locations, right? That's what it means, that the locks are differently taken by different groups of threads. So that is okay. For example, if there is a lock per thread block, it might still be okay. And one of the favorite implementations of locks is not only using the data and control flow as we saw earlier, but can also be nicely implemented using atomics, which seems to be a more popular way of implementing locks, even on the CPU. So we'll see how that needs to be done now. So brings us to the second part of synchronization, which is atomics. Any questions so far on control and data flow? All right. So let's.
Sir, the spinning part that I didn't understand.
Oh, I see. Sorry. Yeah, I'll explain that. So what happens when you are taking a lock is that you check if you are able to get the lock or not, in the sense that whether you are able to access. So in the previous case, for example, the while loop that we are talking about, that is continuously waiting for flag of other to become false or victim to be equal to not me, right? So it is waiting for that condition to, the while condition to become false. This waiting is called as spinning. It is just spinning there. It is just eating up CPU cycles, checking for these conditions again and again and again and again. Often these variables which are involved in the condition are volatile variables, and therefore there is also memory IO involved in checking these conditions. So the CPU is just continuously waiting there and doing nothing. I mean, there is no useful work getting done. Semantically, there is some progress in terms of that I want to check whether there is a lock available and so on. But otherwise, it's just waiting. It's not doing any algorithmic processing. And therefore, that cost across all threads, if one thread is in the critical section, all the other n-1 threads are waiting for this thread to release the lock. And that spinning cost can become very high. So as far as the hardware is concerned, it thinks that all these threads are actually executing some instructions, but they are semantically not executing any useful instructions in the algorithm. And therefore this cost, which is hardware is unaware of why a thread is executing the same instructions, that it doesn't know. And therefore application wise there is no real progress, and therefore there is a cost involved in this spin. Right? So that's what it means. Does that seem reasonable, Sanket?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Any other questions? All right, so let's come to atomics. What is the meaning of atomic? Atomic essentially means, and that's what we have been discussing, some of you have also used it in the assignment, is that the effect of this statement, atomic statement, should be visible either none of it or all of it. There should not be any partial effect of this atomic set of statements. In this case, it's going to be a single statement, but there should not be any intermediate state visible to the outside world. Right? So that's what is the meaning of atomic, that these are primitive operations. Primitive meaning these are not high level operations. These are something which need to be supported mostly in hardware. So these are primitive operations, fundamental operations, whose effects are visible, never partial. So think about it this way, that let's say a teacher is giving some assignment to a student, right? If the teacher is meeting the student every week, let's say, it's possible that, and if let's say 1 day is required for finishing that assignment, then assuming that the student does it completely in 1 day, the teacher is going to see the assignment to be not done at all, or he or she will see the assignment to be fully done. Right? The teacher will not probe the student in between that, oh, have you completed part of this assignment? Right? So if that is the case, then we say that the assignment checking or the assignment operation or the finishing of the assignment, not checking, finishing of the assignment is an atomic operation, because none of the instructors will be able to see the intermediate state of that assignment. They will be able to see that the assignment is not done or the assignment is fully done. So that is like an atomic operation. Although as far as the control and data flow was concerned, we kind of relied on some hardware support there. A similar hardware support is required here also. So what was the hardware support that we looked at when we were looking at the control and data flow? There was some assumption. What was that?
Sir, when a write is happening, no other thread can read it simultaneously and read a garbage value.
Correct. So the assignment statements that we had, flag of me equal to true and victim equal to me, those were atomic in nature. And it so happens that almost all the hardware are going to have primitive type assignments or primitive writes to be atomic. That is, if you are writing to a character or a byte or an integer, float, and these days double also, all these assignments can be made atomic, or these are by default atomic by the hardware. And therefore, you don't have to really worry about that any intermediate state will be visible to the other threads. In some earlier architectures, double was not atomic. So if you are writing 8 bytes of double, 4 bytes will get written by one instruction and then 4 bytes will be written by another instruction. Then the intermediate state might be visible, and therefore we require different mechanisms if you are writing parallel program where double was getting written. Thankfully, that is not the case now. So here also, so that was one. The second part which we kind of required was that there is a volatile support in the language. So although the language might support volatile, but that also needs to be enforced when you are creating the assembly code. So there is something, a notion of memory fence, which makes sure that you don't write only to the cache, but you make sure that the updates are visible in the main memory or whatever is the L2 cache, the shared cache across all the cores. So that requires a memory fence instruction, which is also there at the language level, but it definitely needs to be supported at the assembly level. So if you look at the assembly code of CUDA, which you can generate using -S option, you will be able to take a look at the memory fence instructions which might get generated when we are dealing with volatile variables. So those two atomic primitive type statements and volatile were the assumptions about the code that we had seen. In this case also, there is an explicit type which is going to be supported for the atomic operation. So that's what we are going to look at. There are multiple variants. Some of these you must have used. If you have not used, not a problem. For example, there is CAS, which is there also on the CPU. It's called atomic CAS on GPU in CUDA. CAS is what?
Compare and set.
Compare and not set. Something else. Right. Yeah. So it's compare and swap.
Yeah, in our course, it was like zeros and ones were swapped. So like it was said, compare and set in the OS course.
Okay, sure, no problem. So typically, I mean, these are the two variants: test and set and compare and swap. Test and set just checks for if the condition is, if the variable value, the shared variable value is 0, test that it is 0 and set it to 1. That is test and set, and all of this operation gets done atomically, which means that you can't intervene in between. After you have tested, but before setting, can you intervene? Can you check the value of that variable? No, that cannot happen. Or can you update the value of that variable? That cannot happen. So that is the guarantee that hardware gives. Similarly, in compare and swap, you provide an additional value. Instead of setting it to 1 in test and set, you swap the value with the variable. So you say that this shared memory location, if it has value v1, then replace it with value v2. Right? So that is the compare and swap the values of v1 and v2. So that's called as compare and swap, as Amit, Shagnik, and Mrunalini have suggested. So this operation turns out to be a very fundamental operation, CAS, and it's also useful in many cases. It so happens that once you have CAS, you can implement other variants. What CUDA has done is that it has implemented those for you and provided those variants. For example, you can implement minimum operation, minimum between two variables using atomic CAS, and that it's also provided as an API. So you can implement atomic minimum, atomic addition, etc. Right? So there are large number of different variants of these atomic instructions. So atomic min means that you check if given shared memory location and a passed value, whether which of these is minimum, and set the shared memory location to the minimum of these two values. So if it is already minimum, leave it as it is. If it is not, then you replace this value, the shared memory location, with the value, smaller value which is provided. So this operation, this complete operation, turns out to be in an atomic manner. Similarly, addition of two variables, shared memory location plus a value, you add that value to it. So that turns out to be so there is a reading of the shared memory location, right? So for comparing, and then for writing to the shared memory location, also there is a write involved. So there is a read and a write, and both of these operations are atomically done. Right? So therefore, you need a special provision from the hardware. If you want to implement it in software, that is going to cause an issue, because these are multiple instructions and any other thread can intervene in between, like we saw in the previous case. All right. So interestingly, these variants not only work with global memory, but also with shared memory, which means that if there are some atomic operations which you want to do within the threads of a thread block, you can make use of a shared memory there, which will turn out to be much faster compared to global memory, because there the first thing is that the number of threads involved is going to be much smaller, maximum 1024, compared to, let's say, tens of thousands of threads for the global. The second advantage is that shared memory is at the L1 level, and therefore the operations, the memory fence operation is going to be much, much faster. But in general, when we talk about the atomic operations, we usually talk about global memory shared across all the threads, but all these concepts can be nicely translated to a thread block also at the shared memory level. All right, so let's work out a few things, right? So let's take a look at this code. What I'm doing is I'm calling the kernel very simply with just 2 threads. And then I am performing a plus plus x of 0 operation. This we have looked at in different ways earlier, but this is primarily for completeness, just for each of you to be on the same page, because we wanted to understand what is the issue. I mean, why do we really require an atomics? And this simple example will convey to us what can happen, right? Some of you can tell me what is the value of x of 0 after this kernel is finished. We can assume that it has the value 0 initially. Right. So Parth is suggesting 1 or 2, assuming that the value is 0. Venkat says x of 0 plus 1, x of 0 plus 2, 1 or 2. Right. So all of you have indicated that there is some sort of non-determinism which might happen because of this. So there are 2 threads executing plus plus x of 0, and they are writing to the same memory location. They are reading from and writing to the same memory location x of 0. And that can cause an issue with respect to the thread interleaving. And I'm just going to show you that by dividing this plus plus x of 0 into multiple instructions. This we have also discussed earlier, but this is for the completeness sake. Plus plus x of 0 is equivalent to load the value of x of 0 into some register or a temporary, increment that register, and then store that R1 into x of 0 back. Typically, the x of 0 will not get directly incremented at the assembly level. It needs to be stored into a register, increment the register value, and then store it back.
Sir?
Yeah, Venkat.
Sir, but since they are in the same warp, we can say that it's just going to be 1, right?
Yes, that is correct. We'll come to that part. That is correct. So when they are in the same warp, then this issue is not going to happen. So that is something which we are going to see. But if you imagine these to be totally independent threads, which can happen if we increase, let's say 2,1 rather than 1,2, then this is not going to be guaranteed. So Venkat's observation is correct that this is exactly the same warp. And therefore, all of these operations are going to have an implicit barrier here. Right? That means that all the loading is going to finish. Right? What this means is that both the threads are going to load the value into their individual registers. Right? Then both the threads are going to increment their own registers and then increment their registers to value 1. And then both of them are going to write to the same memory location. And therefore, irrespective of how many times you run the code, you will get a deterministic output of 1 in this case. Does that seem reasonable? Anybody has any issues with that? So this is a very important point, that in general, when the threads are independent, at that time 1 or 2 is a correct answer. But when we are dealing with a single warp, then this particular code is a deterministic code, and you will never get 2 answers. You will always get 1 answer, which is always wrong, right? Because that is not the anticipation with respect to the output of this code. Does that seem reasonable? Any suggestions, any comments, concerns? Okay. So for now, we are going to assume independent threads, which means that these could happen in any arbitrary manner. Right? So let me remove that. So these are happening arbitrarily by different threads. And so assume, I think I should have probably written the kernel of 2,1. But anyway, for now, I think we'll keep that in mind. So these 2 threads are completely independent. So what can happen is that if you again plot the timeline, both of these load the values in their registers at the same time, both the threads, both of them increment the value, and then one of them might store first, another might store later. That is one possibility. Or if it so happens, so definitely the value of one is possible even if they execute in lockstep manner. But if they happen one after the other in any order, then also there is a possibility that you might get 2 as the answer. So definitely there is a possibility of a data race here, right? If the operation is not atomic. Yeah, so that's what we are mentioning here. There is also another complication. So for now, we have assumed that x of 0 is an atomic memory location, or accessing x of 0 is an atomic operation. That need not be the case. You might say that I load the value of x, then I add 0 to it, right? If it's an unoptimized code, then I add 0 to it, and then I read the value from there. That is also another possibility where that x of 0 might get split into multiple assembly instructions. And if there are more number of threads, definitely there will be issues with respect to the number of variations in these execution orders, and therefore the number of outputs can also vary. Right? So we are going to fix this with atomic, where all or none behavior needs to be done. And for plus plus, there is a nice atomic instruction, atomic increment, which is provided by CUDA. And the first argument to that, so it takes 2 arguments. One is the shared memory location, which needs to be read, incremented, and stored back or returned to. Right? These 3 operations are done atomically. And then the second argument, which is not very important really, is, I mean, some of us might get confused that many times we give the value 1, and you might see that there is no increment happening because of this. And the reason being that that value n that we give here, that actually is, as I have posted on Moodle, this is the largest value which can be attained because of the atomic operation. So as soon as that value is achieved, it comes back, wraparounds to 0. And then again, this circular behavior keeps going, right? So if n is 10, the values start from 0, goes up to 9. As soon as 10 is reached, it becomes 0. So 0 to 9 values keep rotating around if you keep incrementing. So this n for our cases can be very large, like int max or something, and that should suffice for our purpose. Any questions on this basic atomic operations?
Sir, we said that the for primitive types, the atomic behavior is guaranteed by the hardware, modern hardware. So when we say this, we say that the memory fence will be at the L1 level cache, right? Because there's no sense of, like, because if all the writes are going straight to memory for even the smallest writes to regular ints or something, then it will be very inefficient and there won't be any use of L1 cache.
Yes, so that's a good point. I think I did not make it clear. So atomic, okay, so there are 2 concepts. One is the atomicity of a set of operations, and the second one is the atomic primitive, like atomic increment, atomic cache, etc., which is provided by the library or CUDA. When we are dealing with an atomic operation, right, over a set of statements, it's like a critical section. At that time, we are not talking about memory fence per se. Okay, let me put it this way, that when we say that flag equal to or victim equal to me is atomic, what that means is that write you cannot intervene. But that doesn't mean that the write is being ensured to be done inside the main memory. Right? So otherwise, we would not require volatile keyword there. So if you do not have volatile, then victim equal to me is going to be written possibly into the cache, depending upon the cache policy, whether write through or write back, etc. It might not get reflected into main memory. If you want it to be reflected, then you require a memory fence which is ensured by that volatile. Does that seem reasonable? Only for that variable. When we are talking about this atomic instruction or atomic primitive, which is support like atomic cache, atomic increment, etc., there is an implicit memory fence at the end of the atomic operation, and therefore there is a guarantee that this particular write, that is when you read, compare and write, after that the effects are visible in the shared cache or main memory. There the caching effect will not harm even if the variable is not declared as volatile. Does that seem reasonable, Venkat?
Yes, sir. So what we're saying is for the atomic instructions which are implemented directly by the library or the hardware, that time it'll ensure that there is proper visibility to other threads after the
Yes.
critical section has been executed. But for regular primitive types, the regular writes, we can just say that even if it's written to L1 cache, someone else can't read from there, but I can't guarantee that it'll go to the RAM.
Perfect. Perfect.
Okay.
Sir,
Yeah, go ahead.
sir, in the last slide, I have one doubt.
Sure, I'll go back to the last slide. This one?
Yeah, sir. So as Venkat pointed out, in warp, this issue won't happen, right? So, like here, the D kernel is 1, 2. So that means, it is acting in a warp, right? Both threads.
Yes, that is true.
So
Yeah.
this timeline will happen like this.
No. So this part is going to be executed together. Both these stores will get executed together, but because of that, the value will never be 2. You will always get the value as 1, which is also wrong.
Okay.
Right? So both these stores are going to store the same value 1 because they have incremented it separately into their registers. They loaded 0 value, incremented independently to 1, and now both are writing to the same memory location in the same, let's say, instruction. And therefore, they both are going to write 1. This particular code will not have non-deterministic output. It will always have deterministic output of a wrong value 1.
Okay, sir. Okay.
Right? Any other concerns here?
No, sir. I understood.
Sure. Okay. So in general, when you have K1, K2, right, that's what we wanted to really get to. It will ensure that x of 0, the atomic increment will ensure that x of 0 is incremented by exactly K1 into K2, irrespective of in which order threads are executed. Right? So that is a guarantee which is given by the atomic instruction, essentially coming from the hardware. And therefore, you will have a deterministic behavior of this code as soon as you replace plus plus x of 0 by an atomic increment. All right. The question is, when would this effect of K1 into K2 be visible? Any suggestions?
Sir, I didn't understand the last point.
The last point of what Shira was saying?
No, sir, like D kernel K1, K2 would ensure x of 0 to be incremented by exactly K1 into K2 times, irrespective of the thread execution.
I see. Sure, I'll explain that. So the number of threads with which we are launching the kernel is K1 blocks, and each block contains K2. So there is K1 into K2 threads. Each thread is incrementing this value, not because of this, but because of this atomic instruction. Right? And therefore, starting from, let's say, 0 value of x of 0, the final value is going to be K1 into K2. Now,
okay, sir.
Yeah.
I thought like previous code will increment it K1 into K2 time, but it will increment it only once. But this atomic increment will increment it by K1 into K2 times.
So okay. So I think I should point out what happens in the SIMD case also. Thanks, Mrunalini, for that question. The atomic increment operation. So in the last case, we had this issue of that since there were 2 threads and the same warp, therefore there was a possibility that you will never see the value 2. However, when you have atomic instructions, even if you have this particular code, there is a guarantee that the atomic operation by individual threads of the same warp will ensure that the value is incremented appropriately. So there won't be any issue because of the SIMD execution if you are using atomic increment or other atomic variants. So in this case, if we use atomic increment, irrespective of whether, I mean, for example, I can call the kernel as 1, K1 into K2. Still, even though there are K1 into K2 divided by 32 number of warps, the value will not be equal to number of warps. It will be equal to the number of atomic instructions executed by individual threads. Right? So that's another guarantee which is given by the atomic instructions. So that's an important point. Please note that. In case when you are not using atomic, then all these quirks come into picture, the SIMD execution, etc. Here also, I mean, finally the hardware has to ensure SIMD execution for that matter, but the behavior, the visibility at the outside is always that all the atomic instructions by individual threads of the warp are independently executed. Independently meaning they will be executed, right? Even if these are happening to the same memory location. So that's a good point. So our question was, when would this effect that the value of x of 0 is K1 into K2, when will that be visible? Venkat said that it will be visible when the entire kernel has finished, right? Is there any place before that when this value could be seen? So when the last thread, that is K1 into K2 thread, I mean some thread, it could be thread 0 also or thread 100 also, whatever. Whenever that last thread finishes its atomic increment, at that time the value will be visible. In this code, we cannot just interject and check the value here. However, if you have a barrier here, which is across all the threads on the GPU, then you will be able to see the value being available. But in this code, Venkat is right that this effect is going to be visible to us at the end of the kernel, which means that if you launch another kernel with x as a parameter, you will see x of 0. If you just try to print it in a different kernel, then you will see x of 0 to be K1 into K2. All right. Okay, so we'll come back to our shortest path example. So this was our example from that we discussed, and we had this distance update which was happening. Yeah, go ahead.
Sir, the previous slide. So since we have atomic increments, does it make the kernel execute sequentially?
Yes. So if you have only atomic increment in the kernel, then the code is actually going to get executed almost sequentially. That is correct. So typically so that part is correct. So your observation is correct that if we have atomic increment here, and that is the only instruction inside the kernel, then the code is actually essentially a sequential execution, just that the ordering amongst threads is not known. The expectation is that the synchronization should be as small as possible within the code, and there should be enough number crunching happening. There should be enough compute intensive operations happening inside the kernel. And then at some places you have this synchronization. So there are three, since this has come up as Jiva has asked, there are three kinds of operations which happen. You can divide the operations according to three parts, similar to the three parts that we have decomposed our course in, the three important parts. One is computation, another is memory, and third one is synchronization. If it's a compute heavy part, that part should be as independent as possible, and typically that is the case. Then memory operations, these could be to independent memory locations, but these are memory bound in the sense that this will involve a large latency because of the IO with let's say DRAM or last level cache. The third one is synchronization. The cost further increases. So the compute heavy part to memory, the cost increases, and it increases further when you have synchronization. So you have to always watch out for the compute heavy part should be as high as possible. The memory part needs to be optimized, If you have synchronization, then that part needs to be definitely optimized. Right? So that's kind of what we should look at. So here the shortest paths we can compute instead of the direct assignment, because multiple threads can write to the same memory location like this, and therefore we need to guard it using an atomic instruction. And as soon as you replace it with atomic minimum, that is going to ensure that this distance of n is going to be checked against the alternative distance, and if alternative distance is smaller, then distance of n is going to get updated with the alternative distance. This operation is atomically done. So this is how we fix the shortest path code also. So we'll have to stop here. Any questions? All right. So see you tomorrow.